Hello and welcome to another modeling video. This is Alan from the Mokonoman YouTube with another model video. Today we'll be building and reviewing the Tamiya 1/700 scale I-58 submarine. Not building, but we're going to futurely share the 16. We've got a traditional box with a fair amount of artwork all around, and the insides with 2 runners, 2 hulls, and an additional runner with extra aftermarket parts, turrets, aircraft that would go along a wide variety of Imperial Japanese ships. Not so appropriate for a sub, but excellent for the bits box. We're given an instruction sheet of the different components to add to various ships for various times of war, a decal sheet, and 2 instruction sets, one in Japanese and English. The side of it covering the vast history of the vessels and how they served during the war. The instructions only cover 3 particular steps: building the command stack, all the different wiring, antennas, cranes and whatnot, assembling the seaplane, and sub-assembly of the rest of the hull. I'm not particularly an sea vessel expert, nor have a lot of experience or built a lot of ship models. I find them very delicate. However, a fairly interesting enough subject matter. The more complex, they scare me off a bit with the amount of very fine parts, doing the fine string and the mountain of photo etch parts that require freestanding attachment with very little surface area to attach to the model, and any form of errors sticking out quite a bit. The building process is probably the most important factor, but there's still not that much to it. It's a very time intensive activity. This Tamiya version is far more simpler and a really good entry experiment for beginners. If you find yourself doing a lot of fine military subjects with very thin parts such as ships and armor, where you're likely to distort or damage snap parts, you're best investing in one of these single-sided fine cutters such as the God Hands or one of the more upmarket Tamiya nippers. You will find the process to be far quicker than sawing off the parts, in accompany to that a fast drying plastic cement. The correct form of using fine nippers is accompanying it with regular nippers to cut straight into the runner, and where you have the finest bit, the gate, you do a secondary cut with the finer nippers as flush as possible to the part. Any exceeding nub will be removed by a knife, and any really fine areas, flush it against a board to cut, or maybe a grinding or scraping tool. As mentioned, the first step includes the removal and gluing of the bridge, which is in 2 parts. And the only bit where you'll be required to seam line, fill and glue together. I've utilised Mr. Dissolved Putty to do this and glued 2 parts together once the nubs were removed with the previously mentioned technique. Afterwards it was just applying detail to it, adding it to the rest of the hull, adding more detail, and the bottom half of the hull. As we've inspected the parts for the 2 submarines while talking my thoughts on building ships and some of the struggles, we could see that there's quite a bit of detail that is extruded out rather than recessed in like panels. This is the hallmark of very old tooling and an older style of kit. Looking at it, it's interesting enough that everything is a down-up single-sided style mold, and makes for slide assembly very simple and a very appealing model with fairly little bit of work. The entirety of the assembly process has probably taken me less than 2 hours, taking a fairly slow and casual approach. Accompanying the 2 kits you got plus all the extra bits and pieces, it's not bad bang for the very little you're paying for this model, which is around the 600 yen price from Japan, probably about $10–12. Submarine is a fairly unusual subject matter. The biggest draw card to make it an impulse purchase was the seaplane on top. Going into painting, we primed all the surfaces with a grey hobby primer mounted on skewers. They were a fair enough of surface to attach with the alligator clip without any issue. Being two separate pieces of the lower and upper hull, this was very easy to paint red without the need or aid of masking. Airbrushing was simply done with a very primitive rig of a 12-volt compressor and a basic double action Heising airbrush from China. I used mostly lacquers from Mr. Hobby and chose out the colours by trying to match them with the box art and blending two tones to get a light effect rather than going for full authentic historical accuracy. I didn't want to buy extra paints for a subject matter I don't normally build. Hand painting the little aircraft was an absolute joy with a fine brush, and dabbing the little dots for the Japanese rising sun symbol, the little cockpit, all of that. A wash will tighten all that detail up. Didn't have as much success with the little Japanese flag on the side as decals weren't included. I had some aftermarket planes laying around, use that reference to. You may remember on the rear of the box has multiple drawing dimensions of the various submarines showing exactly the outline of the different shades and colours of the decks and components of the hull. This made sure that the correct areas were painted, though it was all free-handed by airbrush, only the tiny components done by hand. It would have been nice if there was some form of reference for the aircraft. Once everything dried the next day, I applied a gloss coat, gave everything a sludge wash with Tamiya enamels. As the detail was well and truly raised, it didn't flood out from application of airbrush, suggesting it was also designated for hand painting to occur. The wash picked up all the detail nicely, and looking at it from either photo form or in person doesn't look too ridiculous. I think the finer the subject of model, the more you have to exaggerate detail or it's completely lost even without paint. I've found in some of my 3D printing and design works. You can't have absolute accuracy, but rather something that looks authentic and convincing. My attempt of this was not too bad. There's probably a little bit of distortion or lumps in some of the antennas from clipping with the nippers and not an ideal clean, and a bit of the hand painting is a tad on the sloppy side. Wish there was a decal for the Japanese flag on the side. There wasn't any other finish issues, paint issues or top coat issues, and it just came together quite nicely. Very happy with my attempt on this one as a fairly quickly throw down 3-4 hour build paint speed process. My last build was very unsuccessful, and this was a bit of a mental break build to put something together for quick content and raise my confidence up a bit, and it definitely did that as a quick different project. Would recommend anyone picking up any of these smallish destroyers or unusual tiny cheap Tamiya or the other brand of waterline ships. Once all the washes had a chance to dry, harden and finish, a final coat of a gloss acrylic to seal everything in. I also assembled two halves with PVA glue, and a final coat of Guy Note Absolute Premium Matte to give the ideal sheen. Finished. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, stay tuned for more content. Happy to answer any questions in the comment section below. Have a look at the description for references related to the build, all the different social medias where other content such as up to date work in progresses, events, and news in the industry will be regularly updated. Some builds don't appear on YouTube until they've been finished many months ago, and editing, scheduling does take place. Been making a lot of content on my other YouTube channel, the phDManChild, and that wraps everything up. Thank you for watching, thank you for your support, and see you all later.